Another season of Forgotten Horror has come to an end, but as Field paraphrases Al Pacino from Scent of a Woman,
we're just getting warmed up!
Spend the next few months with Forgotten Cinema as Season 7 kicks off with movies from all across the decades. We jump to the 70s to talk about The Front Page, starring Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau.
We dive into the 80s with Michael Mann's Thief and the Dennis Quaid Meg Ryan thriller DOA, and then slice into Butler's childhood years, the 90s, with The Last Samurai and The Negotiator.
That's right, Field. You're old. So very, very old.
Shut up, Butler.
Forgotten Cinema, part of the Forgotten Entertainment family.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Elise.
Hosts of Crackin' One Open with Mike and Elise.
A podcast about brews, news, and pop culture reviews.
Every Friday, we choose a new craft beer from a different brewery and talk about
the history of the beer,
what's in it,
how it was made,
the history of the brewery,
along with tasting notes and more fun facts.
After that, come chill with us as we bring you the latest in pop culture news and reviews.
So check out Crackin' One Open, part of the Forgotten Entertainment family.
Hi, I'm Mike Field.
I'm Pat Whalen.
Pat is a lifelong comic book geek.
And Mike is a filmmaker and storyteller.
So naturally, a bulk of our conversations surround the world of the Marvel movies. Some consider the MCU one of the greatest achievements in modern-day filmmaking, and others just think they're comic book movies. Each episode will tackle one film and discuss the differences between the comic book and what's on screen. We'll explore the growth of the Marvel Cinematic Universe from its inception to present day and beyond, and have a little fun along the way. You may not have asked for it, you certainly don't need it, but you'll be happy we're here. We think. This is yet another MCU podcast. What's up, Pat? We have traded our celestial wings and we are in Queens.
Yeah.
So we have returned to talk about a returning hero to the Marvel world via contract disputes and legal matters. Spider-Man Homecoming.
He's back. So let's hop on that N train, head over to Queens, and let's get started.
Absolutely. All right. So we're doing Spider-Man Homecoming this week. A runtime of 133 minutes, rated PG-13, as they all are. Production budget $175 million. Right in the sweet spot, as Pat likes to say. This movie came out on July 7th, 2017. So big time summer movie. Opening weekend, it did $117 million, domestic $334, and then worldwide $880. Obviously, I think there was a lot of people who wanted to see this movie.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is not our first time seeing Spider-Man in the MCU, as many of you are probably already aware. So this is directed by John Watts, who goes on to direct Spider-Man 2, or excuse me, Spider-Man Far From Home, and he's going to do Spider-Man whatever it is with home in the title for number 3.
Home run, homeschooled, home away from
Pat's
home.
got some guesses. Pat's got some guesses on that one. We have Chris McKenna and Eric Summers. Well, first of all, there's like 6 writers here. Jonathan Goldstein, John Francis Daly, John Watts, who's also got a writing credit, Christopher Ford. And then there's 2, Chris McKenna and Eric Summers, who actually go from this to write the next Spider-Man Far From Home. So the other, there's a lot of writers.
Well, I think John Francis Daly, he was in Bones and Freaks and Geeks, right?
Yeah,
and now, does he write? Is that what he does?
I believe his writing partner is Goldstein.
Okay.
And they did Game Night. They've done a bunch of movies that if I listed off the movies, you would have been like, oh wow, I didn't know they did all those. Yeah. No, they're doing well. Music, you have Michael Giacchino coming back, who just recently did Doctor Strange. And then that's it for any kind of connection in terms of people below the line.
Yep.
With the other movies. All right, so Tom Holland returns as Spider-Man, Peter Parker. Then you have Michael Keaton here as Adrian Toomes, or the Vulture. I guess we'll get into that later. You get to see Marisa Tomei again as Aunt May. And then you have all the new people that are in this movie, which I'm not going to give you all of them, but you have Zendaya as, I guess, Michelle, but technically she's MJ. Right. Then you don't know that till later. You have Jacob Batalon. Did I say that right?
I think so.
Batalon, whatever. He plays Ned. Tony Revolori as Flash.
Great name. That's a great name.
I didn't realize that Suit Lady is Jennifer Connelly, and then obviously
yes, Karen, right?
I know. My note is that Spidey suit's such a Karen.
Fortunate timing.
And then and you have Donald Glover as Aaron Davis, which we'll get into his character's connection a little bit. And I actually like Donald Glover in this. His stuff is funny.
It is.
Why don't you? I don't know. Just tell me about the movie.
All right. So 16-year-old Peter Parker, high school student in Queens, is off screen and prior to the events of this movie, bitten by a radioactive spider and gained superhuman strength, the ability
for those who don't know,
the ability to stick to walls, and his spider sense.
I'm just going to go on record. I think I've already said this here. but I prefer the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, where he actually has the web shooters.
You actually haven't
him.
said this in this one, unless
Really?
you said it. Yeah.
Oh no, I actually prefer the Spider-Man who generates his own webs. I'm sorry.
We're going to talk about that later.
But I like
yeah.
that. But go ahead.
Through the events of this movie, Peter is essentially an associate or sidekick of Tony Stark, and he tracks down a arms dealer, salvager in Adrian Toomes, and has to stop them. Learning, with great power comes great responsibility.
That is not in this movie, Pat. You can't bring that up.
Right. So learning that you're nothing without the suit, you just have to do it yourself.
Correct. Which is the lesson that Tony learned in Iron Man 3.
Yes.
But we'll get to that later.
Yeah. We talked about John Francis Daley being one of the writers, his experience on Freaks and Geeks. Great show about high school. I think is, a really good comedy, really good, emotional story throughout that series. A lot of that carries over into this. My problem with this film is, on the one hand, it's a really, really strong coming of age superhero movie.
Mm-hmm.
And all the stuff in high school, all the stuff with Peter figuring it out is great. On the other hand, it's so tied into the MCU and so tied into being Tony Stark's apprentice that it hurts this movie.
I think Stark in the movie does not help. He's not really a mentor, but he's supposed to deliver the lesson. Like, if you're nothing without the suit, okay.
Yeah.
Him in the movie just kind of distracts from everything else. It should be about Peter and his friends and Peter and his mother, or excuse me, his Aunt May. But I do like when Tony is like asking about Aunt May and
kind of hitting on her.
Yeah, I do enjoy that. That's funny.
In Robert Downey Jr. and Marisa Tomei have history. They've been in movies before.
They've dated, I think, which that really doesn't matter here and there, but it's still funny. It works. But that's really, how does that help the story in any way?
It doesn't.
Right.
Historically, with the character, he was always, 15 or 16 when he got his powers. When Stan Lee created him, he put man in the title. He put man in his name. He wasn't like Kid Flash. He wasn't Aqualad. He was Spider-Man, despite his age. And in this one, he still feels like the sidekick, even though his name's in the title of the movie and he's supposed to be the main character.
Yeah. One of the most iconic moments in the Raimi Spider-Man would be is the second one?
With the
train.
Yeah.
So in this one, they have the scene on the ferry. Doesn't it make you think about that?
There's two moments in this film. It's that one and it's the Washington Monument one, where they were more focused on these. I think they were more focused on making iconic moments than letting them be organic iconic moments.
Okay.
They had him flipping over the Washington Monument and they had him, stretching to save the Staten Island ferry, which, like you point out, is very similar to Spider-Man stopping the train.
Especially that one shot. Just the one shot of him trying to pull the ferry together. Yeah.
Again, I like the film a lot. I think Tom Holland is a great Peter Parker. I think he's a great Spider-Man. I think the early stuff in terms of setting up the story is a great kind of introduction without an exposition dump.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Keaton is fantastic. But I think they forced some of these iconic moments in there.
For instance, that ferry one.
The ferry one and the Washington Monument.
But I'm trying to think, because as you talk about that, I'm trying to think of the set pieces. We can get to this when we do the split between the movie and the comics, but I know that scene when he lifts the rubble off is supposed to be...
That's straight from the comics.
But that's a big moment in the Spider-Man comic. Does that necessarily translate to being an iconic moment on the screen? For you, at least?
For me, that was the bigger moment. I wish it was lit a little bit better.
Right.
Because I think it suffered from the same problems that maybe like Batman 1989 does, where the final battle is up in that really dark bell tower.
Sure.
I think this suffered from some poor lighting decisions in this particular scene, especially if you want to make it an important moment. But seeing Peter crying and screaming out, asking for help.
Yeah, you never see Spider-Man cry or something.
Well, no,
like
you
that.
do. But like seeing him in that, like that was a good moment from Tom Holland.
Sure.
And then he decides, I got to do it by myself. Nobody's coming to save me. I need to do this. And he does. And that's very similar to the scene from the comics.
Just to kind of give you a little bit of some behind the scenes stuff, or I guess the technical aspects of this movie. Kevin Feige doesn't get paid for this movie because that was part of the Marvel Sony deal, that he wouldn't take a compensation for this movie.
Sure. I'm sure he was
like
hurting.
He needed. I know exactly. Oh, what am I going to do? This July 7th release date was actually meant for Thor Ragnarok. And then Thor was moved to November 3rd, and then that pushed Black Panther. So for whatever reason, whether it was delays, I can't remember, but it kind of pushed the MCU down the line a little bit.
See, I'm actually surprised to hear that, because the other Thor movies had come out in November, and that's when Ragnarok comes out. Right. So I thought they were just lining that up to be, Thor. And I think Black Panther came out in February, so Black History Month. I thought that's what the tie-in was.
Maybe they just kind of was kismet that worked out that way. I think whenever Black Panther was going to get released, it was going to be huge, so it didn't matter what month it was in. This is the 8th time that Robert Downey Jr. has played Tony Stark. It's John Watts, who's the director. If you follow John Watts, he does Cop Car, and he did a couple like smaller films, which makes sense that he would be in this movie. But he actually makes the cast. He got the cast over the younger cast, I would assume, and made them watch a bunch of John Hughes movies because I guess that this was very similar to trying to mimic that John Hughes sentiment, which makes sense. But the end title credits and the music and all that stuff kind of, I don't know, reminded me of Shazam, which is the DC.
Yes. The end title is definitely different than other movies we've seen.
Right.
And I don't know if that was Sony engagement there or if I don't know what that was. But, I had fun. Same thing with Far From Home. They do a similar end credit sequence.
Yeah.
With music and stuff.
Yeah. So this is the 4th highest grossing Spider-Man movie to date domestically. Okay. And it is
out of 5.
Hang on. And it is the 2nd highest grossing movie worldwide. Can you tell me what the first one is? Number 1 of all the Spider-Man movies. You're not going to get it, but go ahead.
See, let me walk through my thought process here.
Go for it.
I want to say Spider-Man 1.
Okay.
But I don't know how the inflation dollars work on that one. And the reason I want to say that is because of the Entourage episode where they want Aquaman to beat the Spider-Man release numbers. I know Into the Spider-Verse did big money and cartoons are big, but I want to say it was Amazing Spider-Man.
You are incorrect. It is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. Number 1 worldwide, baby. So you can all make fun of it and hate on it all you want. It was number 1 worldwide. And at the time I took these notes, which is probably, a couple years ago when these notes came out, it is, I would assume it's still number 1. I should have fact checked that now. But yeah, Spider-Man 3. Right? Didn't see that coming, did you?
I'm not surprised by that now that you say, because it had the conclusion of that story, how well the first 2 had done.
Well, the second one is fantastic.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
I think that probably was a lot of hype around the third one.
Then you have Venom, who is a huge character that fans love. And I think it came out, if I'm not mistaken, right around the time of episode 3. So I think they were like almost like a back-to-back where there was a ton of these big kind of tentpole trilogies ending. Right. I think that probably helped a lot too.
Well, the expectation is that the sequel will always outpace the original. If and if you do well in the sequel, the next one should outpace it too, because people are just want to see it. There's more of a desire to see it. That doesn't really hold true in terms of these movies, like Thor Ragnarok we're doing next week. And you're like, oh, okay, it's the third Thor, but it's like I've been seeing Thor throughout all these movies, so it's really kind of.
And the last one was terrible.
Yeah, it skews that model of thinking in terms of sequel to the trilogy. It's really just, it's obviously it's the phenomenon of world building, but all these movies are like sequels of the next movie, and you don't have specific characters in certain films, and you're not, you know what I mean? The expectation, where does it go? So before we go into the other stuff, let's just talk about the movie a little bit more. A couple things that I wanted to bring up. I didn't realize Stark Tower is really right near Grand Central, is like that close.
Yeah.
The first thing. And then Tyne Daly in this movie. Why? So Tyne Daly from Cagney and Lacey plays the head of damage control when she comes in, and she's such a jerk in the movie. But then you never see her again.
No.
And I want to get into damage control a little bit later on in the comics and in the MCU. This is the first time we see him in the movie, and I think it's the last time we ever see them, which is interesting. We'll get to that. Did you like the Spidey theme playing over the Marvel Studio logo?
I did like that.
Okay,
that was I like that a lot.
So this is actually the first movie that is. Because the first 2 logos are like Sony and Columbia, and I'm just like, what?
I was waiting for it to come, and it took forever to get here.
Oh, I know, right? And I will say this: I did not mind the Stan Lee cameo. I actually was okay.
I like the Stan Lee cameo too.
How's your mother? That probably worked the best.
I had forgotten where he was in that one, and that's the cameos that I like the best. Is where they don't impact the viewing of the story.
And they fit.
Early on, they fit.
Yeah.
He's this New Yorker.
He's not squeezed in.
Yeah. He's talking to the lady across the street.
Him being in that apartment makes absolute sense.
Yes.
Rather than him being at a party in Avengers Ultron.
I didn't mind that one either because he did serve.
I get that, but I'm just saying that it still feels forced in there.
Yes. Yeah. Him opening up his window and it's like, oh, hey, there's Stan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The theme that they use in the movie, is that the Avengers theme? Did we just hear that theme? It seems very familiar, the musical theme.
Oh, his music, not his Spider-Man theme.
No, not his Spider-Man theme. Like the theme for this movie was like, dun, dun, dun,
I think
dun,
it was
dun.
like,
Isn't that Avengers?
I think we might have to look into it more, but it might have been like a
riff on it?
like a riff on it. Yeah, like a maybe incomplete Avengers theme. Like
Very
he's not ready
familiar.
to be an Avenger.
Yeah, very familiar.
Kind of like I think of it as Hans Zimmer doing the Batman Begins
Mm-hmm.
soundtrack and then doing the Dark Knight, where he's developing the theme for Batman through the soundtrack. So
Mhm.
Batman doesn't have that theme yet.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't until like he's the fully fleshed out superhero that he becomes that he gets the big Hans Zimmer type theme. So I would think
Right.
it's something like that.
Some of the other things I want to point out that I was kind of like, when he's trying to get a hold of Happy, and he's like, I've been calling Happy.
Yeah.
And then finally Happy answers the phone, and it's like, well, why? Just because you needed to find out.
to
Right.
Pass along the
Exactly.
exposition. Yeah.
It's not that easy to for two dudes, shady looking dudes, to walk into a high school and just kind of walk around. That is not that easy.
No,
and this is
not even in 2015,
This is 2017.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, but people are like, "What are you doing here?" There's no way they can do that.
even
No
if
way.
you're pretending to be somebody's parent, you stay in the office.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
the kid comes to you and
Yeah.
he's like, I don't know these guys.
The other thing is, I want to talk about Ned. I don't know if I like Ned.
Okay.
I feel like Ned's a liability because he can't keep his mouth shut. I don't know if I enjoy Ned. In the second movie, I definitely don't. But I definitely have a problem with supporting characters that are there to make me laugh for some reason or be goofy. I know we have talked this about Daredevil, the TV show. I've always hated his partner.
Oh, Foggy Nelson.
Yeah, I cannot stand him.
They're
And then,
two avocados at law.
I will say this: I do have a problem with supporting characters a lot of times because
Yes.
it's just I feel like they're there to just be funny.
Further the conflict, like
Right.
get the conflict started, get them in trouble. So
Yeah,
you know.
unless you're somebody who is genuinely funny, like Donald Glover. His two scenes in this movie,
Are great.
he's hilarious, and just that's him. That's the supporting character I enjoy, not
Yes.
somebody who maybe doesn't have. I don't know. I don't want to, denigrate the actor because I just it's again, it's not just that. It's probably the writing and whatever it
Yeah.
is. But I just don't know if I dig it. I don't know if I dig it.
So I'll add a counter to that.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily know that I'm in love with the Ned character, but I like that he grounds Peter a little bit more.
Okay.
Where, traditionally Peter, he had friends. He had Harry Osborn eventually. He had a handful of people, but he was a little bit more of a loner. He was kind of doing things by himself. When you see him in the high school scenes, it's fun that he has like this other kind of loser friend with him
Mm-hmm.
that, regardless of whether Ned has a character arc or whatever, I think in terms of what they try to do together, it grounds him in this high school story.
Yeah.
And it, doesn't just say this is, it's not like it's Smallville
Right.
where they're pretending, okay, we know you're Superman. Now you're a 32-year-old guy going to high school. I think Ned helps ground him in this high school reality that they're, it helps there.
I got you. No, I listen. I'm not dying on that hill. And
Yeah.
It's me, and I could be wrong, and feel you're an idiot, and that's fine. I get it.
No.
But a couple things I did like. I obviously talked about Glover. I actually really like Michael Keaton in this movie. I like his reveal. I thought that was well done. In terms of like him being the bad guy, and then when he's talking to Spider-Man. And he's like stalling so that the wing can cut off everything.
Mhm.
He's just like, he makes a lot of good points there.
No, Keaton was great.
Yeah.
I think Keaton is actually, aside from Thanos, might be the best villain in the MCU.
Well, he's a regular guy who got screwed over, and he's taking matters into his own hand. I mean, the smartest bunch of salvage workers ever.
Yeah.
I know that dude's supposed to be the Tinkerer, and we can get to that, but he, and he's against Spider-Man, who has abilities, but he's a regular dude. So it's two guys, which is nice,
Mhm.
and it's good to see, and it's not like you're not fighting some space entity or Loki, magician, a trickster, that kind of stuff. No,
He was a down on his luck guy that kind of took matters into his own hands.
Yep. I thought the ending with Aunt May is extremely funny.
Yes.
I thought that was a
good.
really good end. And finally, Pat, she returns. Pepper Potts has come back to the
Does she
MCU.
know
I knew you were going there.
Does she know she's in this movie?
Yes.
No, she doesn't, because this was the movie that confused her.
but she still was there. Well,
No, I
is
know
it
she was
shocking
there.
that it confuses her? Because we joke about how Spider-Man Far From Home is Iron Man 4, so why would it confuse her? It's obviously.
This is the one. So anybody that has watched the movie Chef, great movie.
Excellent
We
movie.
watched it last week before recording this.
For the
but-
first time?
No,
Okay,
no,
good.
no. Just watched it again.
Yeah.
But Jon Favreau has a show on Netflix called The Chef Show, where he works with Roy Choi, who was his kind of chef consultant for the movie Chef. And he goes around and just makes stuff. And he has a bunch of guest stars. So there's one where Tom Holland, the Russo brothers, Robert Downey Jr., and Kevin Feige were all on it. But then there was another one where he brought Gwyneth Paltrow in. And this is where this stems from, is her saying, were we in that movie together? And it's because they filmed a lot of these at the same time down in Atlanta. And so they were giving like half, so sides are the small version of the script that they hand to actors to say, this is what we're working on tomorrow, or this is what we're working on today. They just kind of hand them to you. When you're only there for like 2-3 days at a time to shoot these little scenes, you probably don't really know what movie you're working on. So we teased Gwyneth Paltrow mostly because of her goop nonsense. But in fairness, I don't, you know.
You say we like it's me. You tease Gwyneth Paltrow.
I tease Gwyneth Paltrow. I tease her mostly because it's the goop nonsense. But, you know, I give her credit for doing this, and clearly I would be confused as well.
All right. So with that, let's go into, unless you had anything else to add.
No, that was it.
Let's go into some differences between the movie and the comics.
Yeah. So Spider-Man was created back in 1962. He was in Amazing Fantasy number 15 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, names you've most likely heard before if you've listened to this podcast. Amazing Fantasy 15 was actually the last issue of that series. So they canceled it after that, and very likely the most famous issue of that series. And it introduced Spider-Man. He's, for anybody who's seen the cover, he's swinging through the air with a criminal in tow, and it's very reminiscent of Detective Comics number 27, which is the first appearance of Batman. And so Stan Lee, as we kind of mentioned, you know, he wanted this kind of new kind of teenage superhero. He didn't just want the sidekick. You know, he wanted an age appropriate real superhero that could match the audience that was out there, which at the time was a lot of teenagers, a lot of college students. That was what Marvel was hitting on. And so Martin Goodman, who we've talked about in the past, wasn't really entirely on board, but it was just kind of like, you know what, go ahead, do whatever you want to do. It's the last this year. I don't care. And so it took, you know, that one blew up, obviously, but it took 7 months to get the first issue of Amazing Spider-Man, which was his solo run. So he didn't come out until 1963 with his own series. Just to kind of give you some background on that, a near mint condition issue of Amazing Fantasy number 15 sold for $450,000 in 2016. So it's probably picked up there a little bit, especially after some of these movies. I'd be interested to know what it was selling for around 2002, which was the Sam Raimi movie. Speaking of Sam Raimi, this isn't the first Spider-Man we've seen on screen. This is the third. We've had Tobey Maguire's trilogy with Sam Raimi, and then we had Andrew Garfield's duology.
Duology, nice. That's what they call it?
Yeah.
Nice.
It was only 1 and 2.
Well, aren't they all coming back? Well, maybe. We'll see.
We'll get to that.
So this was the first Spider-Man film that has his web wings.
Yes.
From the comics.
So you've seen it most notably probably in the Washington Monument scene. Originally, when Steve Ditko drew the character, they were just kind of like a stylistic choice to kind of separate him from. He didn't have a cape, so he was different from Superman, Batman, some of the other characters. But it was just a nice little like kind of stylistic piece to kind of separate all that. So there were webs underneath his like elbow, basically to the side of his ribs. They weren't really meant to do anything, but later characters have used them as a gliding tool, like we see in this one. By contrast, this suit is most similar to the Ditko era stuff, less pronounced webbing, just a few lines here and there, blue and red. The Raimi one pulled from Todd McFarlane, who had designed the character in the 80s and 90s. A lot more pronounced webbing on it. So if you go back and look at the Sam Raimi Tobey one, it's got a lot of just like webbing pieces and intricate pieces that, you know, when you watch it, you're like, how the heck did a kid make this? And they, of course, answer the question in this one, which is that Tony made most of the suits.
Right. But they also say in this one, and I think you've talked about this before in the comic, that Peter Parker is supposed to be on par with his intelligence with Tony Stark, right?
Yeah. And there's the nice scene in this one where he's making the webbing in science class.
Right.
And
that is better than when Happy's looking at him crying almost when he's making the suit.
Oh, in Spider-Man 2.
I mean, listen, I know you're I know you can be super smart, but if you don't know the user interface of this high tech computer system, how are you gonna know how to make a Spidey suit?
Right. Yeah. So I think there was a number of moments in this, whether it was him making the webbing himself or just the debate team, where basically he leaves and then he comes back and they're like, yeah, you're back on the team.
Yeah.
They acknowledge like clearly Peter's smart.
Yeah.
And it was also the scene with Flash where Flash got something wrong. Peter just kind of like raised his hand and said, here's what it is. And so there's a lot of these moments where, you know, his intelligence is on display.
Yeah. The homemade suit that he has that they kind of show in when he loses the Tony Stark suit, that's based on or similar to Ben Reilly's first Spider-Man costume in the comics. Who's Ben Reilly? Oh, nice.
How much time we got?
Not a lot.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go into Ben Reilly's entire history. It's incredibly complicated. He was the star of a series called The Clone Saga back in the early 90s that was just a mess. He's essentially a clone of Peter that for a time thought that he was the real Peter Parker.
Okay.
And then later realized that he wasn't. And he was a clone.
When readers were reading it, did they know he was a clone? Or were they pretending he was Peter Parker for the readers?
No, they were saying that he was the real Peter Parker.
Okay.
And if anybody wants like a kind of shortened version of this, instead of tracking down and dealing with the convoluted mess that is the Clone Saga, there's Spider-Man Life Story, which is a series by Chip Zdarsky. I think it's 6 issues. Each issue basically puts Peter Parker in a different decade. So it follows from when he was 15 in 1963 all the way up until 2019. And it's his life as Spider-Man. And everybody ages appropriately. So he gets older as it goes on. And they kind of sum up the Clone Saga in the middle of the story there. I think it's like issue 3 and 4. That's kind of the best way to just, if you just want a quick hit of what Ben Reilly is, that's the one to do it.
Nice.
But to your question, yes. So he used the name Scarlet Spider when he was a superhero. His costume was inversed. So in this one, you had the blue tights and the red hoodie.
Yeah.
He had the red tights and the blue hoodie and almost like a spray painted Spider logo on it and cut off sleeves and everything.
Okay.
So and a utility belt. So yeah, that was a little bit more where they were stealing this from.
Okay. This is also the first appearance of Cindy Moon, who is Silk from the comics. Now, she's one of the debate team people.
She is one of the debate.
Okay.
I didn't know she was in this film until you asked
I
me.
know. Well, I didn't even. Who's Silk? Just my biggest thing with that note was who is Silk in the comic?
I'm assuming this is just going to be an Easter egg more than anything, but she was a newer character introed, I don't know, 6-7 years ago.
Okay.
She got bit by the same radioactive spider that Peter got bit by.
The exact same one?
The exact same one.
On the same trip?
Yes.
Jeez, that spider was getting around.
So, unlike Peter, and to your point earlier, she developed the organic web shooters, the ones that come out of her wrists.
See, I like her already.
And this is just to kind of give some background on those. We've talked a lot about the Ultimate Comics universe and the Marvel universe proper. In the Marvel universe proper, he built the web shooters.
Right.
That's what they go for in this one. In the Ultimate universe, they're organically in his.
I think that just makes a heck of a lot more sense. I understand using the building it because he's a super smart kid. Right. I get that. It just makes a lot more sense that he has them.
And I think they're going. Or this movie is very much like the Ultimates one. It takes Peter and puts him back in high school, dealing with high school problems while trying to be a superhero. It's
also a different feel for an MCU movie, even though technically it is, but it isn't. It's just it's technically a Sony film, but it's within the universe. Yes. So. But no, I think that's a good, much like we always talk about Fantastic Four, putting them in the 60s. Like it's just a different, it's a different feel. Style, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's a big bonus for this movie is that it could be a standalone. You know what I mean? Aside from the Iron Man stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Back to Cindy Moon, because they both, Peter and Cindy, share the spider sense, they become attracted to each other. Peter goes through a list of women in the comics. Just everybody in it.
I thought it was always Gwen Stacy or MJ.
No. So there was Liz Allen was another character. He was one of his first crushes. That's why I think this twist in the movie works so well, is because viewers, if you know the comics, every time they say Liz, because I don't think they ever say her last name, you assume her name is Allen. You don't even think about anything else.
That it's Toombs, yeah.
And then when the reveal happens, you're like, oh. And even if her name is Allen, maybe, that's her mother's name or whatever. but you don't think about it that way.
Well, maybe it'll be her name after because her father's going to jail.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I want Toombs to come back.
I want Toombs to come
just
back.
like
too.
Hammer. Like, good. Bring them back.
Bring 'em
'cause
back.
Those are your two best villains, and you're doing nothing with them.
Yeah. So we'll get to him in 1 second. But no, Peter had a ton of girlfriends. MJ, the Michelle one. Like, I don't like that they call her MJ. Like, there's this.
Well, because you have to have her in the movie, though, right?
You don't, because MJ doesn't pop up in the storyline until they're out of high school.
Okay.
Well, except for in the Ultimate, she's a high school student with them, but she's like.
I think you have to have her there, though. I mean, I understand why. I get what you're saying, but I also understand the other side.
Like, and if you're gonna do that, just call her Mary Jane. Why do you have to call her Michelle? Like, it just seems
True.
like
True.
A half-assed attempt on both sides.
So Ned, he's actually a reporter at the Daily in the comic at the Daily Bugle. He's not Peter's friend at all. So you think they just tossed him in here again as an Easter egg?
Well, no, there's precedent for him. So yes, Ned was a Daily Bugle reporter. They're rivals for Betty Brant, who's the Daily Bugle secretary, who we see in the Raimi ones. No, what they're taking here in this Ned character is the character of Ganki Lee, who is Miles Morales' best friend. So Miles Morales, for those who don't know, he was the second Ultimate Spider-Man, the one he picked up the mantle after Ultimate Peter Parker died fighting the Green Goblin.
In an alternate universe, Pat.
In an alternate universe. So if you want to listen, if you want an intro into Miles Morales, just go watch Into the Spider-Verse.
Well, we'll get into Miles Morales because that's my next comment.
Yeah. Okay. So they take the character Ganki Lee, who is his, heavier set Asian American friend, and basically the same character. This is who they take.
They just combined them.
Just take Ned's name because Ganki doesn't sell to American audiences. Let's be honest here. Am I wrong?
Well, I will say this. I think that you can make anything sell. Okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. But as some high-powered executive who has no idea about anything, exactly that's how they're thinking. Yeah. But no, you can make anything sell. Come on now, Pat.
Sorry, I'm just thinking.
Pat, we're a part of a podcast, one of 145 MCU podcasts out there, and we're making this so.
True. Yeah.
I mean, right?
We are yet another.
Yeah.
So they kind of sidelined Harry Osborn as Peter's best friend because we'd seen him in two previous adaptations.
Even though I like Osborn, Ned. Yeah. You talked about Miles Morales. Yep. So we talked about Donald Glover. He's actually supposed to be playing his character, Aaron Davis, in the comics is known as the Prowler.
Yes.
And he is the uncle of Miles Morales. Now, I did watch Into the Spider-Verse. He's in the Into the Spider-Verse, right? Right. He's the bad guy.
He's the guy in the purple costume.
Right. Okay. So
with the claws and everything.
I guess if you want to explain it a little bit, you don't have to get deep into it, but
yeah. So there were a couple different Prowlers. There's some from the mainstream Marvel. One including was a kid named Hobby Brown. He was a villain sort of, but then turned into an ally of Peter Parker. And then there were a couple other here and there, but they weren't as important. The one that we get, Aaron Davis, by Donald Glover, he's from the Ultimate Universe too, which is where Miles Morales comes from. So one thing notable to the Donald Glover connection is when they started talking about a remake of Spider-Man following the Raimi one and then the Andrew Garfield one, there was a fan campaign online to get Donald Glover to play Miles Morales.
Well, isn't he his voice in one of the comics?
He is his voice in he came in voice, I think, in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's a little too old now.
Yeah.
For that character. But yeah, no, that's fine. Especially since they've already introduced him as the same
as Prowler.
Yeah.
But I think, I think him staying on, if you bring him back as the uncle, if you want to introduce Miles, but you've now taken away Miles' best friend. So like what else?
Oh, in
Ned in
oh, right. Okay.
So like what else,
Well, I would just imagine that this is an alternate universe, and that in this universe, Aaron Davis isn't the Prowler, but rather just, I guess, he's a thief or something, or he's a robs. What's he
I think he's just general kind of
gun or something in the beginning,
kind of crook.
Yeah.
So he's got this purple, green, gaudy looking costume, claws and everything, and he's a villain, and he goes back and forth against Spider-Man, and that's part of it because the reader knows, but the people involved don't really know. Eventually, in the Ultimate Comics, Aaron Davis creates his own version of the Sinister Six. And the Sinister Six was, essentially when 6 of Spider-Man's villains come together to fight him.
Let's team up.
That's it. And this movie had 5 villains, technically. So it had the Prowler, had the Vulture, obviously. Scorpion was in it. He's one of the guys on the Staten Island ferry and who ends up in prison with Vulture at the end.
He's got that mid-credit scene.
Yep. And then Shocker is in there. So he's the guy with the kind of gauntlets that are fighting Peter outside the homecoming dance. And then Tinkerer, Tinkerer was just always more of an admin guy. He would just build the stuff. There's talk that hopefully there could be a Sinister Six in later movies, and I think that would be a good chance to bring back both Scorpion and Vulture, and maybe even a way to bring back Donald Glover's Aaron Davis and have him like eventually invited into the group, but doesn't want to take part.
Yeah.
And maybe, he's how Spider-Man finds out about it or something.
Well, talk about Vulture in the comics compared to how he was portrayed here. Same guy, same idea, same salvager?
Kind of, yeah. So same guy, Adrian Toomes. He typically wore like a green bodysuit with wings. It's not great.
Is the apparatus that the wings, is that similar?
It's similar, yeah.
In design and stuff
but I think
like
they made it more tech-based, more hover focused with the rotors in it.
Was it built with alien technology in the comic like it was here?
I don't think so.
Okay.
He was supposed to resemble, so in the comics when they drew him in the Ultimates, supposed to resemble Jason Statham.
Okay.
I think this is better casting. I don't dislike Jason Statham.
Is phenomenal.
But I think this was a better choice.
Right.
But yeah, so between the Prowler piece here and the Ned piece, bringing in Miles Morales might be difficult. Right. Unless they do some multiverse stuff, which is what
which is on the table, I guess. All right. So two more things if you you have more. One, I talked about it briefly before. It's when he lifted the rubble. That's from Amazing Spider-Man number 33.
Yes.
What is so iconic about that in the comic?
So, yes, Amazing Spider-Man 33 was part of the kind of famous 3-part If This Be My Destiny storyline, which was really quintessential Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Introduced Gwen Stacy, Harry Osborn, who are key players in the Spider-Man mythos. So Spider-Man gets trapped under rubble while he's fighting Doc Ock. Dr. Octopus, played by Alfred Molina in Spider-Man 2. Aunt May is sick and Peter is worried about losing her. So he really kind of he flashes back and thinks about the death of his Uncle Ben, who we know he was in part responsible for, which is not something we see in this series. Similar to the murder of Bruce Wayne's parents. How many times do we need to see Uncle Ben die? But he's trapped under it. So he kind of just, and he can't get out, and he uses this, he just sums up whatever strength and whatever force of will that he has and picks himself up. Mm-hmm. And so there's the cover of him of Amazing Spider-Man 33 has him buried underneath it. And then there's this famous scene that has him picking it up and saying, I could do this, and realizing with great power comes great responsibility and all that stuff. So yes, they kind of pulled that right out of the comic and put it in the movie, which I've said this before. I love Tom Holland's vulnerability in that scene. I think he does a good job selling it, and I like it.
Okay, so this will kind of transition us, unless you have other...
No,
this will transition us into the MCU stuff as well. Damage control. In the comic books, it's a private repair and reclamation company specialized in dealing with damage caused by superheroes and supervillains. Yes, I wrote this down. As well as various items left behind by either community. But in the MCU, it's a government organization with the same purpose. Talk about damage control in the comics, and then I want to talk about why we have not seen damage controls till now.
Okay. So, first off, I love the idea of damage control.
As do I. I think it's more accurate in Pacific Rim.
Yes. I think that's a good point. So you said that, they're a government organization.
In the MCU.
In the MCU. In the comics, they are owned by Tony Stark.
Okay, but they're private. But the private organization.
The private organization, in part owned by Tony and Wilson Fisk, who's the Kingpin, who we see in the Daredevil Netflix shows. And Kingpin kind of crosses over as Spider-Man, Daredevil villain. The conflict of damage control kind of typically, they're an organization. All they do is go salvage stuff. So you either have to have corrupt employees, or you're fighting over ownership. And that was kind of the main driving one when they first came out, which was Stark and Kingpin. Stark said that they both sold their share in it, and then it was revealed that Kingpin had secretly kept his. And then it became the fact that maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. owned a part of them too, so they're quasi-government related. Very similar to what we have here, just different type of ownership, and I think they're playing up some of the government pieces here. As you would imagine, the government would come in and want some of this stuff.
Yeah. So let's go into the MCU and get out of the comic world a little bit. Or forever for this episode.
Mike feels uncomfortable.
No, not at all. And the movie, damage control is that they get all this stuff and they store it in a warehouse and it sits there. Like I said, but we both said we like the idea, but why have we not seen it until now?
Well, we were supposed to get a ABC show.
Oh, Christ.
But I think it was going to be more of a comedy. Kind of remember that superhero DC one that was on NBC? Capes or something. Do you remember that one? It had Vanessa Hudgens and Alan Tudyk.
Vaguely.
I think it was supposed to be like that. And when that bombed, they pulled the plug on Damage Control. It would have been a nice way to kind of integrate some of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff into the MCU proper, even if you don't want to acknowledge any of the actors.
Right.
It could have been a nice kind of bridge where you see some stuff popping up as Easter eggs. But I don't know, maybe it'll be a good Disney Plus show or something, or they're just characters within the universe of the Disney Plus, maybe like Winter Soldier and Falcon.
Right.
That might be, where they just pop up in the background.
Maybe. Well,
I think that could work.
Well, here's the thing. You put Tyne Daly as in this movie, you expect to keep seeing her. Like, I would expect to keep seeing her moving forward.
Yeah.
All right. When he gets trapped in the truck and he gets put into the Damage Control warehouse, I guess he's supposed to find an Ultron bot head. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I didn't notice it, but I had some notes here that he found a couple of different things.
Oh, go ahead. What are they?
It's just some of the same tech that we, Chitauri tech that we knew about. I guess there was some stuff from the Lagos scene in Civil War that might have popped up, and as well as pieces of Ultron.
Speaking of Captain America, did you notice who was in this movie that has a relation to somebody in the first Captain America?
Yes, I did.
Okay, go for it.
No, you want to say it? I don't want to take this.
No. If you noticed it, go.
It was the principal of Midtown Science Academy.
Principal Morita. He also played one of the Howling Commandos. Same actor, Kenneth Choi.
Yep, in Captain America and the First Avengers. And the in-continuity story behind that is this is actually his grandson.
Right.
Or son or something.
There's supposed to be a picture of his grandfather in the principal's office.
Yes.
As a Howling Commando. He's Howling Commando Jim Morita.
Yeah.
So do you think that was just, hey, be in this, it'll be fun? Or do you think he just got the role and they're like, hey, weren't you in the first one?
I want to go with the latter.
You look familiar.
I want to go with the latter because it's so good. Because it might have been like a Sony casting, as they were kind of developing it.
Oh, maybe.
Sony might have been like, oh yeah, let's take him. And then Marvel's like, okay, this is ours now.
Yeah.
And then they're like, that guy's been with us before. Let's just, make him look exactly like his grandfather did. Or father, I guess. I don't even know how the age would work there, but I like it. I think it's a fun piece. I called it out when we were watching. I was like, oh, hey, by the way, that's, so and so.
And then she turned to you and said, nerd.
Yeah. Eyes never rolled harder.
This movie, they referenced Civil War in terms of, because that's where you first saw Peter. That's where you first saw Spider-Man. And they referenced the fact that, I'm kind of his friend. He's calling Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Because he's all excited now.
He's got the Stark internship.
Right. They put Tony Stark in this movie, I would assume, because to give it more credibility, to give it more oomph.
Star power,
to connect it more, to connect it with the MCU more. Because I don't think they need it. I think you can reference all the stuff that happened. Like you said, this could have been a standalone. You could have just had a tag at the end.
Yes.
I don't think you need Iron Man in there to deliver that message. I mean, it works. It's not like it doesn't work, but you can deliver that message any other way that you don't need the suit.
Yeah, and
that could have, let me just throw this out.
Yeah.
Vulture could have stolen his suit. And he could have said the same thing to him. Well, you're not much of a Spider-Man if you need that suit.
Right.
And then he could have stole it back. He could have done stuff just right off the top of my head. He could have done something like that.
He could have hired Aaron Davis, Prowler, to go steal it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could have bumped up his character more, which would have been fine.
Yep.
I would have liked to have seen a Spider-Man Homecoming without that. How would it have been?
I'm hesitant by how much they think that Tom Holland can carry these movies, because you see him, he interacts with Jennifer Connelly's Karen suit lady character the whole movie. Can he not just emote on himself? Was that a protective? Well,
you're gonna find out when he's in
Uncharted.
Yes,
but he's not the.
Well, he's not. It's not Mark Wahlberg's in
Mark Wahlberg's in Uncharted as a side character, which is
know.
not. Yeah, we've got problems with that one. But even the scenes where they have Peter alone as Spider-Man, he's never alone.
Yeah,
he's got Suit Lady, and Suit Lady kind of talks him through things.
Well, you have that moment at the end that you like when he's tearing up and he pulls the rubble off.
Yes,
you have
but
that
he's in
moment.
his own.
Right.
That's, again, where he's in his own.
Well, here's the thing: can he do it? I think so.
I think so.
But did the filmmakers have enough trust for him to do it? Maybe not.
Right.
That's something you have to earn, I'm sure. You know,
they threw him in a hard position.
Yeah, and that's these movies are tough, man, because you come in and you're like super excited to be one of these, title characters, one of these iconic characters, not just Spider-Man, but any of them, because they have such a rabid fan base, and but it's corporatized. It's so, it's very similar to The Boys, I guess, because I know you like that show. But it's just so managed and focus grouped, and there's no. There's definitely creativity within the performances, but not a lot,
and not in the marketing. And I bring it back to Entourage, and wow, we're getting a lot of Entourage references.
That's 2 Entourage references. We've met our quota.
We have more Entourage references than Mark Wahlberg ever gave.
Listen, I have forgotten more of Entourage than I've watched.
I like this. I like the season where he's becoming Aquaman. Like I really enjoy that season because it speaks to a lot of this stuff. And there's the scene where he's Vince, the main character, Vince, Adrian Grenier, is preparing to be announced.
Vinny Chase, dude.
Vinny Chase.
I even know that.
He's preparing to, he's at like a Comic-Con type event. They're announcing him as Aquaman, and he has to sit down with a character played by Rainn Wilson, who's like a kind of Harry Knowles type Ain't It Cool News guy who can kind of make or break the film.
Right.
And so Vinny has to
ridiculously. Yes.
Yeah. But that's how it was
I
back
agree.
then.
It's how it is now.
Yeah, and so he had to study up on the characters and know them well enough to sell. And there's some other shenanigans, Entourage related shenanigans involved. But basically he had to study up and know the character backwards and forwards so that he can sell it to this guy who could buy into him.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it too. Is you need to. Marvel does a good job with these likable. They'll be on Instagram saying, I'm reading. Brie Larson did it. I'm on Instagram. She's on Instagram showing pictures of all her source material that she's reading. And so they do a good job of putting that out there for the fanboys. And then they get on the late night shows and they're all charming and personable. But I had a question for you on this one related to the MCU.
Okay.
Who's on the Avengers now?
During this movie?
Yes, because we go at the end, we see the Quinjet fly away. Peter's about to be announced being part of the Avengers. He declines.
Right.
Iron Man's a little bit more of a support role. War Machine is Rhodey is still dealing with his legs and his spinal back problem. And it's Vision, because we know Hawkeye and Ant-Man are under house arrest. Black Panther, who had sort of been on Team Iron Man, was really Team Cap now. He's in Wakanda. He's taking care of Bucky. Black Widow, also Team Iron Man person, basically took down Black Panther, now has to go on the run.
Well, they never say that she's on the run.
But we know
he just says they're going to come for you.
Yeah, but we know in Infinity War that she is on the run.
Right, okay.
And then it's Cap, Falcon, and Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
So who's the Avengers? Like, is it just going to be Spider-Man and Vision?
Yeah. No, you're right.
Like, who is on the team at this point?
You're right. They kind of just blow that over.
Yeah. So that's my question. If anybody else, and Doctor Strange is
hold
unaffiliated.
on. Wait a minute.
Affiliated in Thor and Hulk are off-world.
Well, hold on. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Stark's moving the Avengers facility from downtown Manhattan to that place up in upstate New York.
Yes.
But isn't that the same place that Ant-Man broke into?
Yes. So they were already up there. You could kind of see it's a little bit more refurbished than it had been.
Okay, so you're but
this takes place after that.
Oh, hold on. But then at the end of Civil War, it's built up, isn't it? Or that's still not completely built up?
I guess it's not completely built up.
Yeah, there's a little hazy thing here. I'm sure they have somebody that can explain it to us.
Yeah.
But
if you do,
yeah,
hit us up.
Well,
Get another MCU podcast on Instagram.
Like, it would have been great if, like, when he's like, I don't want to be the Avengers. Dude, I only have like one. I mean, I need more.
I need you.
I've had to make fake suits up of fake heroes. Please come. Cause seriously.
It's your point on Avengers Tower. We know that the whole piece is the final heist is driven by them moving out of Avengers Tower.
Right.
We know it gets sold. So there's been rumors floating around that either it was bought by Oscorp, Norman Osborn's company, or it could be the Fantastic Four. And, at the end of, we'll probably repeat this again at the end of Far From Home, but you kind of see Peter swinging through as it's the epilogue to Phase 3, but it has like road signs for 1, 2, 3. and then 4 is blocked off, and that's when he swings up to the tower. And it's overgrown because nobody had been there for 5 years. So presumably, if it was Norman Osborn, he got snapped out of existence.
Right.
But I'm interested to find out, like, if we ever hear what happened to that building, or if it was just easier to film in upstate New York, aka Atlanta, than it was in.
I'm sure it was
New York.
But that's the problem, though. With Spider-Man, he needs to be in Queens.
He needs to be,
and now he's not. And you know, he shows up for Civil War and he kicks him back to Queens. That's great. And then we'll get into it when we do Far From Home. But then he's nowhere near. We'll get into it. Far From Home. That's another discussion.
I want a New York-based Spider-Man. I don't care how many Spider-Men are in the damn movie. I want a New York-based Spider-Man.
Let's say this about Far From Home and Homecoming. Homecoming has the percentage of how it's a standalone is far greater in Homecoming than it is in Far From Home. Far From Home is now, it's almost like in Homecoming, he's just getting infected with the MCU virus. And Far From Home, it's winning. The virus is winning. Like, it's exactly like it is.
We're rounding the turn. We're rounding the turn.
Like I said, I love world building. I enjoy that. But I would much rather see stronger standalone films. Just give me standalone films, and if you want to world build everyone together in one big movie, then go do that. Stop bleeding into the movies.
Use the teasers to do that.
I don't need, like, again, because they keep announcing it, and who knows what Spider-Man 3 is about. I know they start shooting, but like, Doctor Strange is going to be his mentor. Why? Why does he need a mentor? Let him screw up on his own. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Sorry.
For somebody who didn't even read the comics, you know this.
Yeah.
And I agree. I want Spider-Man doing his own thing.
Screwing up and making mistakes.
Figuring it out. Yeah. When he's in the suit, he's supposed to be more confident than he is when he's just Peter, which we see a lot of that.
Yeah.
But we don't see enough. And I think they could do more.
In Homecoming, he's the one, he causes issues and he has to get around them. And Far From Home, the same thing, but like, I gotta have Sam Jackson telling him you suck. Like, I gotta have, like, not, he doesn't say that, but that's essentially what he's saying. Like, I gotta have that character. I don't need that condescending character in the story. You know, the fact that they make, I'm gonna get to Far From Home, but they make Mysterio, he actually likes the kid. Yeah. The character likes the kid, and he's upset that he has to kill him. I don't like the way they do it because he just suddenly becomes maniacal, but he actually likes Spider-Man, and it's just, whatever.
We'll get into Far From Home next time. Again, this is a really solid coming of age high school superhero movie, just burdened by some of the MCU stuff.
Yeah, agreed. I totally agree with what you're saying, Pat. All right, so next week we're going to be returning. We're going back out into space. We're going to be watching. We're going to be talking about Thor Ragnarok, starring all the usual characters, and I've got a lot to say about that too. So I'm going to leave you. Pat, take it away with some of your Spider-Man Homecoming recommended reading.
As always, at the end of each episode, we like to send you home with some recommended reading that follows up on some of the characters and plots presented in this week's film. Our recommended reading section is sponsored by Infinite Heroes, comics, cards, and collectibles in Watertown, Connecticut. If you're in the Connecticut or New England area, it's a great location to pick up comics from Marvel, as well as DC, Image, and more. They also have a large collection of trading cards, toys, and collectibles. Owner Paul Santos has worked in comics for years, most recently as an editor at DC Comics. Ask him for a recommendation and tell him we sent you. Before we Ragnarok and roll out of here, let's give you some recommended reading on Spider-Man.
That's awful.
First, Ultimate Spider-Man. In 2000, writer Brian Michael Bendis and artists Mark Bagley and Stuart Immerman relaunched the hero as part of the new Ultimate Universe. Tom Holland cites this reimagining of the character as a key influence to his performance. In this long-running series, Peter Parker goes back to his roots as he balances web-slinging in high school. Next, Ultimate Comics, Spider-Man. Yes, the name gets confusing, but just know that this is the series that features Miles Morales as Spider-Man, the same Miles from the awesome Spider-Verse film. Following the death of Peter Parker, Miles picks up the mantle of Spider-Man in this series by Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli. The first few story arcs involve Ultimate Universe versions of the Prowler and Scorpion, along with Miles' best friend Gonki, the inspiration for Pete's best friend Ned. And finally, if you want some classic stories, then check out Spider-Man Blue. We've already given you Hulk Gray, so check out another Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, their Colors series. Spider-Man Blue explores and retells classic Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's tales and explores Peter's early days and his love for Gwen Stacy. Thanks for listening. As always, please remember to subscribe, review, rate, share with all your friends. And if you want more, find us on Instagram, Yet Another MCU Podcast. See you next week.